What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Guys, wanted to talk about who impressed in the season of 2023 and who did not impress in the 2023 season. We might as well start with, Cody, I don't know if you really want to talk about Gardner Minshew in this aspect. I don't even really want to bring up either of the quarterbacks here because Anthony Richardson didn't get enough time to show whether he impressed or didn't impress. And then as far as Gardner Minshew, I think Gardner Minshew did some good things, did some bad things. It's kind of hard for me to kind of place either of these quarterbacks in a category unless you disagree.
No, I think that's fair. You didn't see enough from Richardson, which was obviously disappointing. But with Gardner Minshew, this is what else did you expect? He was a backup quarterback. He's limited. We knew that. So, no, I don't think I'd put either of them on this list, honestly.
Yeah. We can go to two players offensively that did definitely do something, and that was both of your running backs this year, Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss. If you take away the first two games where Jonathan Taylor virtually didn't get a lot of attempts to really get into it, outside of that, the man basically had 155 rushes for pretty much 700 yards, ran for over 4 yards a carry, had 7 touchdowns in that span. Would have been really great to see Jonathan Taylor at full strength to start the year. But thankfully, again, we had Zach Moss, Cody. And it's kind of crazy because we keep talking about Jonathan Taylor recently, and we didn't even get to talk about what Zach Moss was doing before Jonathan Taylor got back. Zach Moss was doing so good. We're almost saying Jonathan Taylor who? At that point, that's how good Zach Moss was for the Indianapolis Colts. He was the Colts offense for a good chunk of the beginning of the year when the offense was struggling to find its way with the different quarterback play and Anthony Richardson and Gardner Minshew splitting time because of the injuries. The one guy that stayed consistent, though, is Zach Moss. So both these running backs did a phenomenal job this year.
They did. Yeah, the fact that Jonathan Taylor only played in 10 games, but you mentioned he had, 741 yards on the season. That's great. That's fantastic that Jonathan Taylor did that. And you do wonder if he did play all 17 games, you think about he'd easily have over 1,000 yards. He'd probably have somewhere 1,500 yards plus, which is definitely great to see. And it felt like the last 2 games, he really started to come on and you really started to see him be the running back that we all knew that he could be. But obviously with, some of the stuff early on, and then obviously with, the thumb injury, the thumb surgery he had, he missed some time this year, more than he usually has in his NFL career. But yeah, you're right. With it, when it comes to Zach Moss, what can you say? Zach Moss, 6 yards short of 800 yards on the season. He definitely looked great in times when he had to kind of take, some of the reps with early on. He looked really, really fantastic. It's just unfortunate that he dealt with some injuries as well, from that horse collar tackle and, obviously the broken arm that held him out of week number 1. But yeah, I think both these guys, you look at it and you say if you bring back Zach Moss, who is an impending free agent, him and Jonathan Taylor, I think easily you could say are one of, if not the best 1-2 duo in the NFL with how great they played this year. And that was, really helpful in the fact that the Colts were one of the best teams at running the football. When both these guys, were in there, they really started to run the football really, really well. So yeah, both these guys, I think, really impressed this year. I think Zach Moss out of the two was definitely the bigger surprise because he played well. He played well in stretches last year, Derek, when JT went down. He really started to put it on this year. At one point, he was number 2 in the NFL in rushing yards behind Christian McCaffrey. So, this dude was absolutely killing it, which was great to see. And so definitely hope the Colts consider bringing him back because we know, and we saw it again against, the Texans, we know how good they can be when they are on.
Yep, absolutely. That will definitely be a question mark to be had, and we'll be discussing that a lot over the next few weeks and the next basically month and a half. Let's go ahead and hop into the offensive line here. I mean, Cody, we say most of the offensive line here. Can't say all of their names, but Bernhard Raimann, again, great year. He has definitely bounced into a good conversation here as the future left tackle for this team. Quentin Nelson had a great bounce back year. Same with Ryan Kelly, despite some of the injuries he's had to deal with. Ryan Kelly definitely battled and has been a phenomenal center this year. Will Fries at the right guard position, albeit wasn't phenomenal this year. He was certainly far from the weakest link on the team. Really did a fantastic job of being an overall average right guard in the league. And of course, the Braden Smith, Blake Freeland experiment, we've seen how that went back and forth. But it's no doubt, Cody, that this offensive line drastically improved and quite honestly is, in my opinion, the most improved group of players on the entire team based off what we saw in 2022.
Yeah, and to give Braden Smith credit, he really tried to play through that knee injury. It must have been bad, the fact that he missed all those games and still wasn't right. So it definitely sucks that he had to deal with that. So hopefully he takes his time this offseason, gets it back to where it needs to be, because traditionally, Derek, he's been pretty durable for the Colts. So I'm hoping this was just one of those things where it's an unfortunate injury year for him. But yeah, Blake Freeland, wasn't great this year, but again, he still was only a rookie. So you got to think he's going to improve in some capacity this year. But yeah, when you look at the entirety of the offensive line, definitely a great bounce back year. And Derek, this is a unit that, like you mentioned, there were some injuries, right? So it's not like the Colts ever felt like they had like the full offensive line for the good majority of the season. It was very rare and very far and in between when the Colts actually had all 5 of their starters healthy. But when they did, I mean, we saw what they were able to do. They were able to run the ball effectively down, the Raiders' throat, down the Texans' throat. But when they aren't, issues arise, but they still were able to hold their own. And again, with the quarterback, like we talked about on the game recap, a quarterback that is so limited, like Gardner Minshew is, and the fact the Colts were able to keep him upright and keep him protected pretty well all year, I think it's definitely great. And you have to talk about what Tony Sperano Jr. and this group did this year. Definitely took a massive step forward in 2023. And so, Derek, this is honestly, when you think of the offseason, I think this is one of those units where you say, okay, maybe you add a depth piece. That's it. You don't really have to touch this unit. You feel really good about where this unit's at with all of their offensive linemen, with all of their starters. Now you have your future left tackle. And when Braden Smith and Bernhard Raimann are fully healthy and out there, they are one of the best tackle duos in the NFL. Like you mentioned, Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, just absolute monsters in the middle. And then if Will Fries is your weakest link, quote unquote, he's an average guard, you're feeling pretty good about where you're at. So definitely feel good about this offensive line unit. They had a great bounce back year and, a lot of guys having career years. So great to see that.
Absolutely. And it was a unit that definitely needed to bounce back with the quarterback play that we were having. It gave the Indianapolis Colts a chance to run the offense that they wanted. From guys who succeeded on the offensive side once more, I would definitely say from a offensive perspective, Michael Pittman and Josh Downs definitely deserve the reins there. Michael Pittman doing things that only some of the greats in this franchise have ever done as far as numbers wise. One of only 4 players ever in Indianapolis Colts history to have 100 catches in a season. And to think he's been doing that with inaccurate quarterback play is another crazy thing about it. And Josh Downs as well, who, again, for many games, Gardner Minshew just never looked his way, Cody. But, I mean, every time Josh Downs touched the ball, the game changed. It was something about Josh Downs that the plays after the catch, that dude has it, man. He has something in him that I cannot wait to see when Anthony Richardson gets back and is finally able to throw the football to him. Those two guys definitely were the ultimate wide receiver weapons this year.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. Michael Pittman getting in the record book for Indianapolis Colts history. Let's talk about Josh Downs. He set the rookie receiving record for the Indianapolis Colts quietly this last game. He finishes the season, like you mentioned, with a lot of questions at quarterback. 68 catches for 771 yards and 2 touchdowns. So that's a pretty darn good rookie year for Josh Downs. And he just continues, like you said, when you get the ball in his hands, he makes a play. You saw him at the end of that game against the Texans. He made a couple guys missed, and he turned what would have been like a 10 to 15-yard pass into like a 30-yard pass. So you feel really, really good, Derek, about these two wide receivers. You're like, okay, you get another legit guy like that in there, and you have one of the better wide receiver duos in the NFL. You have one of the better groups in the NFL if you get one more guy in there. But these two guys definitely showed out. Career years for both of them. Obviously, Josh Downs just getting going, but definitely two guys that I think show that they have enough in what it takes to really be part of this future and really give Anthony Richardson some nice weapons at wide receiver.
Absolutely, man. And now let's kind of head to the disappointers of this year. Was there anyone on the offensive side that was really like a disappointment for you? I would have mentioned Jelani Woods, but I don't really feel like that's fair because, it was disappointing he didn't play. But outside of that, from the perspective of disappointment or who didn't impress, is there anyone on offense that you felt like that?
It's weird because when you have such low expectations for a team and how many guys just honestly flat out played poorly last year on the offense, to see all these guys having bounced back years, it's hard to say that there was a guy on offense that you expected to play at this level but didn't play at this level. It's difficult to say. I don't really know if there's anybody. I mean, I know this isn't, we've talked about this at length. This isn't his fault, but you wish the Colts would have got Alec Pierce some more throws down the field. You just wish you could have seen that a little bit more. And I don't think that's Alec's fault. I think the Colts just didn't get him the ball. Gardner Minshew, namely, didn't get him the ball when he was open multiple times down the field. So that was very disappointing that the Colts had their deep shots, but they didn't take them sometimes.
Yeah, I would definitely say that's been the most disappointing part of the year is the lack of opportunities for some of these guys, right? We talked about the Raiders game and how, it was either Devontae Adams or nothing, right? It felt like that way a lot this year for Michael Pittman. It felt like it was either Pittman or nothing a lot of times for the Indianapolis Colts offense. And that is in no way, shape, or form how Shane Steichen wanted his offense to go. That was just ultimately how Gardner Minshew operated the offense. It was the only thing he could actually do. So you're right. It definitely wasn't great from that perspective. Let's go ahead and hop to the defensive side of things.
Okay.
Just like what we saw with the offense, the defensive line, really showed up this year. 4 guys with 8 or more sacks this season, Cody. Ebukam leading the way with 9.5, Kwity Paye with 8.5, and Buckner with 8, and Dio with 8. Really great to see Kwity Paye resurge in the way that he has. Ebukam really exploded at certain times, and Defoe as dominant as ever, and Dio Dangbo showing a little bit of improvement as well. So, I mean, from a defensive line perspective, it was a really great season to see these guys really step it up a notch.
This defensive line is weird for me, Derek, because yes, when you look at raw numbers, 4 players, 8 sacks. Okay, that's awesome. That's impressive. But you just didn't have that guy emerge. You just still didn't have that edge guy, I should say. DeForest Buckner's on another level. But you didn't have that guy consistently being there and being a double-digit sack guy, which is unfortunate. But like you said, like Ebukam had a career year, which was great. Kwity had a career year. Dio had a career year. But you still didn't have the pass rush when you needed it the most. which was definitely a big bummer, especially considering what was at stake in the last couple weeks. The pass rush kind of failed you. And so it's very difficult for me where I'm like, I don't know if I can put them on the impressive, even though they, broke the franchise record in sacks, because they disappointed when it mattered most. So I don't know. I'm torn on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand the disappointment factor in that because, like you said, I mean, from a totality perspective, this unit was good. But the problem is like you said, we don't have a Trey Hendrickson. We don't have a TJ Watt. We don't have a Myles Garrett. We don't have a Josh Allen. A guy that every single game takes over a game, every single game on the edge. You have that in DeForest Buckner, who has always been a top 5 defensive tackle over the last 3 or 4 seasons. But you can do much better at protecting against a defensive tackle in this league than what you can against an elite edge. That is certainly one thing that Indy does not have yet. And I certainly hope that is something that, who knows, maybe one of these guys will eventually become more of that stature. But it definitely is remaining to be seen. And it definitely makes the question of whether or not Indy is going to attempt to get something there from that edge perspective. Let's go ahead and hop into linebackers here. We have Zaire Franklin, who, obviously broke the franchise record for tackles set by himself in 2022, Cody. And EJ Speed, really coming into that full-time role now. He basically was the number 2 linebacker. How'd you feel about the linebackers this year?
Good and bad at times. I feel like there was just too many missed tackles and too many just things that just aren't acceptable. It's weird because Zaire, yes, broke the franchise. It's kind of like with pass rush. I'm like, that's impressive. That's impressive. But also, when he needed him the most, they weren't making the key plays. It's not like they were bad. Don't hear me saying that at all. But I don't know, EJ Speed was a good linebacker. I felt like he played really well in that role. Zaire, was kind of that captain, but I don't know. I felt like I needed to see just a tad bit more in certain key areas from some of these guys. In critical moments, maybe is more the appropriate word, because there was way too many, especially at the end of the year, Derek, where the linebackers were missing tackles, and that just simply can't happen.
Yeah, I would definitely say it didn't definitely change a lot of games for us. I feel like recency bias definitely plays a lot into it. You're right. The tackling issue, especially from EJ Speed and Zaire Franklin at the end of the year, definitely was a major issue. Hopefully that gets fixed. Now we go on to the secondary. From a perspective of who was positive and who was a disappointment, no question that you have some good and some bad from a bunch of different people here, Cody. I'll just go with my first couple names here that we can be positive about. Juju Brents, definitely saw some good things from Juju Brents this year. Kenny Moore, and I mean, we saw from a single player perspective, Cody, I think Kenny Moore went from the worst to the best on this entire team, honestly. From where he was in 2022 to where he is now, a total 180. Total 180. He was one of the best corners in the league this year. I would even give Jalen Jones a little bit more of the nod on impressive because, I mean, heck, you and I didn't even know if this guy would make the roster to begin the year. And yet we saw a bunch of times where Jalen Jones was locking dudes down. So, I mean, very impressive for the situation that he was given. And then, of course, when you talk about the safeties, you have to throw Julian Blackmon in there. Julian Blackmon was having a career year so far before the injury went down. Now, from the people who didn't impress, we've made our intentions very clear about Rodney Thomas. I know it was his second year, but from year 1 to year 2, it is a drastic drop off in production from Rodney Thomas's sake. As far as corners go, I'll let you throw that name out there because I know what you're going to say, and I always love hearing you say it. So go ahead, you give me your secondary who impressed and who didn't.
I mean, I think we already know who didn't impress, Derek. Do I even need to say it? It was literally Daryl Baker out there, not attempting to tackle. I mean, Derek, good grief, we could tackle better than this man at times. It's bad. And you'd think for a bigger corner, he could actually hit somebody or tackle or do anything, but apparently not. Gets torched routinely. It was clear he was the weak link. But again, he's an undrafted guy. So, like, how much did you expect out of him? I don't know. But just wasn't impressive at all. I'm fine with him and Thomas being shipped out in the offseason because both those guys just routinely looked lost and looked like they weren't trying sometimes. So I'm good with both those guys being gone. Not really impressed by either of them. Thought they both were liabilities for pretty much the entire year. So yeah, not really impressed with him. But again, Derek, I want to talk about, back to the rookie corners real fast. People seem to very easily forget how young this secondary is. I mean, 2 rookie corners, and people act like they need to be shutting guys down from day number 1. It's kind of wild to me. Like Jalen Jones, I feel like has gotten a lot of negative attention recently, but he's a rookie, and he's playing against good receivers. It's not like he's playing against bums and getting torched out there. So I'm just kind of this is what else did you expect, I guess, from 2 rookies playing a majority of the snaps? That's why you play them. They learn, they make mistakes, and they grow from it. So I'm good with that. But yeah, when it comes to Daryl Baker, it's I mean, I never saw any signs of improvement from him or really anything good or him or Rodney Thomas. So yeah, both those guys, especially Thomas, because of the expectations of last year, definitely huge disappointments, no question.
Yep. And last thing here, from a player perspective wise, I would say for special teams, Cody, a disappointment definitely in Matt Gay.
Yeah.
Which is so weird for me because at the beginning of the year, Matt Gay was automatic. Anything. You could send that dude out for a 60-yarder and I would have had confidence that that dude could make it. But now I'm sitting here and I'm saying to myself, now, Cody, at the end of the year, if it's anything above 40 yards, I'm concerned because I'm afraid the thing's going to tail to the right. So, I mean, it stinks because, like we said in the broadcast and we said in the recap at the end of the game, you're paying the dude that amount of money and he can't consistently make a 40-yarder. That something needs to be fixed with that. Either the money needs to change or you need to figure out what's wrong with him because that is definitely not going to be something that is going to bode well for confidence in Indianapolis if Matt Gay can't consistently make these field goals.
If you look at the field goals, I was just checking it out real fast. To be fair, and I know he's getting paid a lot, so he needs to make these. But you think about, really the majority of the kicks he did miss were from 50-plus yards. He attempted 13, he made 8 of them. So that was by far his worst stat was the 50-yarders. He was pretty consistent from really 49 all the way until, short yardage kicks. So definitely got to improve in those areas, especially with how much he's being, paid, like you mentioned. But again, there were a few times where they trotted him out for a 57, 58-yard field goal, and he didn't make it, for whatever reason. But, that is no excuse with how much you're paying him. So definitely need to see him step it up. No question about that.
Yep, absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for this video, guys. That is our who impressed and who did not in 2023. Let us know your thoughts on this. Who impressed for you and who did not. But that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always,